Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining again today. I'm really excited to introduce my friend Linda with you. Linda and I have been friends for over 10 years now. I don't know if you've thought about that before, but it's been over 10 years. We became friends in high school and we were in theater together. So we performed on things like Shakespeare Team. We did our productions company. We were leads together in the musical The Will Rogers Follies, where I was Will Rogers and she was Betty Blake, my wife, and we got to have some onstage kisses. And we also did other things like Troilus and Cressida. We did a fun Broadway review thing together. We were in Doubt together, also as this time instead of being married, we were kind of enemies. I was the ambiguously deviant priest, and she was the very stringent nun, Sister Aloysius. So we had a lot of fun acting together in high school. Across from each other. We got to know each other very well in high school, and I'm really glad that we've stayed friends since then. So I'm very glad that Linda is willing to join on this to tell part of her story since what about what's happened since high school. Um, I'm just going to briefly introduce that topic, and then I'll give you some time, Linda, to talk about yourself, and then we'll get into my questions. Okay? So we're going to talk about divorce today. So this is actually something that Linda and I both have in common. Another thing, right? Both of us are divorcees. I don't even know the right way to say it, but we have both been through a divorce, and I think our divorces were different. And I think it's just valuable for people to hear what divorce is like for some people because it is different, and we all want to relate and feel like we're not crazy for going through something that is really scary and hard. So that's the topic today. And Linda's very brave to be willing to share part of her story with us. So thank you for being here, Linda. And if you want to tell people a little bit more about yourself beyond the theater stuff that I can give, please take it away.
Thank you, Gregory. Yeah, I'm happy to be here too. I'm excited, a little nervous, but it'll be good. Um, I grew up in a big family in Utah, family of 10. Very much a performing family, which kind of pushed me into that world, but I'm very grateful for that because I do love it. And I loved every moment of performing in high school and after with you. Um, what's fun about I guess our theater thing is it brought me closer with high school and with you and everything. It brought me closer during actually the time when I was really separating from my ex and just following through with my plans for divorce finally. So I think it's cool that we're talking about this now because when we were doing that show back in 2021, back in our high school, an alumni show with Follies, um that's right when I was kind of in the thick of it. And I remember talking to you a couple of times about it or just having to like open up because it was so much, so much emotion happening right then and there. I am a very passionate, emotional person. I do have a strong belief in God. That's been a big core in my life as well. And so that's going to play a big part in, you know, how I got married, where I got married, when I got married and how young I was and everything. And so it's going to play a part, but it's ultimately, I don't know. I feel like in my life, I've been pretty blessed and pretty happy. And I think the divorce was probably one of the hardest things I've been through in my life to this point. As you know, I think most young people who have gone through the divorce can say something similar, maybe. But that's me. I mean, I have a puppy. I love my sweetie poodle dog, and I work in property management. It's kind of been something I've been working in for a few years, but um, yeah, not sure what else to say right this
That's
moment, but
great. Yeah, thank you. Actually, I think that's a good intro into came maybe before we get into the divorce itself, do you want to talk about like how did you decide to get married when you did and yeah, explain that process because I know that's kind of fun for people to find out, right?
right? Yeah. Well, right after high school, I worked a little bit and then went on a service mission with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Beautiful experience, wonderful. So that kind of prepared me and propelled me afterwards to start looking for a family, you know. That's something I'd always wanted, was a family, a husband with children. And I've always wanted to be married for time and all eternity. So in a temple in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So that's where I got married for forever, for time and eternity. And it's something I very deeply believed in and still do believe. But obviously through my whole divorce experience, it's put my priorities a little bit differently, as far as just going by the book versus making sure I have the right person in my corner first before making it forever, forever thing. But so
Yeah.
I was still, I mean, I met my ex when I was pretty recently off my mission. So it was about 2 months after I met him in a singles ward here in Utah, which is just the congregation in the church. And it was, you know, a bunch of singles gathering, having meetings and stuff, which is great. And so I was able to get to know him through there. But he was a bit older. He was like 6 years older than me, and a bit eager, I think. And had never had a boyfriend before.
Mm.
Gregory, I think you were one of my first kisses, but I can't really count it because it was kind of on
It
stage,
was a
you
stage kiss.
know.
Yeah.
But that was like as a
Yeah.
senior in high school, you know,
Mm.
one of the first times I kissed a boy. And so um I was very new to the whole dating world, and I just jumped full into it because, again, I'm a very passionate person. And I also used to be, I think, a little bit more of a hopeful kind of, I would say naive person for sure, which I'm not ashamed of at all. This is, you know, why we're here in life, to learn and grow. And I think it's, I think it's not kind to judge our past selves, you know. We were learning. We were where we were then, and now we know what we know now. So, you know, there's some grace to be given to ourselves there. But so I got married when I was 21, after only being with him about 10 months. But we just jumped right into straight dating. He proposed to me the first time after like 2 months. So it was pretty cool.
It's fast. I remember being surprised at how fast things moved for you. That
Oh
was
my
a
gosh.
fast one. Mm.
Yeah, it was intense. But and my family and everybody and my friends were all like, "Are you sure? Like, this is really quick." But again, he was pretty eager. He wanted to settle down and have a family, which is what I wanted as well. So I was like, okay, well, our goals align. This kind
Yeah.
of, this makes sense, I guess. But really, one thing I would have done different is gotten to know him a lot better and slower.
Mm.
And who knows what would have happened then, but I don't. So
Who knows? Yeah. No, that's interesting that you explained like that part of like how you hadn't dated a lot beforehand. I was in the very similar boat actually. When I look back, like I didn't really have a serious girlfriend until my ex-wife. Yeah, and so you know, kind of an interesting similarity there.
yeah, yeah. I think we're encouraged. Well, at least, no, sorry, I shouldn't say we because that's generalization, but I was encouraged by my parents and family and church to date around a lot. But there was also this, you're dating to get married, which, you know, that's kind of logical, right? I guess. um, but with that, maybe me not understanding exactly the full consequence of thinking that way while dating someone, instead of just dating to get to know someone, and to really just like create a friendship first. um, I think that did a disservice for me. It was just something that I believed a little, maybe I didn't understand it quite fully, but I
That
was
makes sense. Yeah, because like I've also come to realize like dating is probably more about discovery and like yeah, than just this. Oh, yeah, like right on the first date. Well, can I marry this person? I mean, like, how could you know on the first date? I mean, sometimes you do know. The answer is no, but sometimes you're not sure, right?
exactly.
Yeah, discovery.
Mhm. I like that. Yes. I look at dating more like that now at this point in my life. I'd rather have a really great friendship that maybe doesn't end up in marriage and family than just constantly have that pressure on my back to meet people just for that purpose, you know. Um, Particularly men for me. But
Yeah,
yeah.
It sounds like it's like my approach to networking, where I hate the word networking in the
Ugh.
professional world, where I'm like, I'm just meeting people to use them. And it's almost
Mhm.
like dating is like, I'm just meeting someone to become their spouse. Like, I
Wait,
mean, give yourself a little time before that
uh,
happens.
for
Yeah.
sure. I think personally, our souls want a deeper connection with people. And when we're just going in with a specific agenda or purpose, I mean, to some degree, we all have that, right? We want to get to know someone, that's still an agenda, right? But I think there's an authenticity that gets lost when we're just trying to find somebody to fulfill one of our life goals
Yeah.
versus just trying to connect with them and be a part of their life and they're be a part of yours, whatever that looks like. I think there's a freedom that comes from realizing you can just talk to, whoever you're attracted to and just try to get to know them. It's pretty beautiful and it's freeing because then there's no pressure on either of you.
Mhm.
And then if something works out, awesome. It works out. You know what I mean? Happy, great. It's perfect.
Yeah. That's cool. I love that. So I think that's a really good intro to maybe getting into the divorce part. So
Mhm.
at what point in your relationship did you start dating that status of the relationship? And maybe like, yeah, how long had you been married and
Mm.
yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. Okay. So I got married July 1st, 2016. Yes. I don't know why I'm like blocking that date probably out of my mind, but that's when it was. Um, it was a beautiful wedding. I had so much fun. I was married in the Provo City Center Temple. It was a blast. And then what was the full question? You said when did I start to doubt or just
Yeah, I guess at what point in the relationship did you doubt the status of your marriage?
okay, perfect. Yeah. Honestly, and this is like really sad, but probably around 4 months, if I'm being generous. Um, it was a pretty quick change in atmosphere, behavior pretty quickly. Right after our honeymoon, we went on like a 2 week long honeymoon to Florida, and then we got back and we were moved into the basement of of my ex in law's house, of his parents' house, and it was a really beautiful house in Harriman. I don't love basements because I love light, even though I still live in a basement right now, but I have windows, so we're good. Um, so it was just obviously moving was stressful in itself, from my childhood home to living with someone for the very first time. Um,
And at that point, besides your mission, you hadn't lived anywhere else, right?
mm-mm,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'd never had my own
Mm.
apartment, never roommated, gone to college,
Mhm.
nothing. I mean, I've
Yeah.
attended some university classes before, but not moved out. That's
Right.
correct. Um, and so it was a huge adjustment right after our honeymoon. I was so
Mhm.
gung ho though. I was like, I'm gonna cook dinner, even though I had told him previously, we're gonna share household responsibilities, because the progressive feminist that I am, even back then I was like, it needs to be fair. You
Yeah.
work, we work together.
Uh-huh.
But I was like super just excited, and he was still doing school and working full time. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna cook, I'm gonna go to work, come home, cook. I'll help clean the house, everything like that.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, about 4 months in, I really started to question it. But it was almost immediately after I moved in with him, after our honeymoon, that it became really clear that it just wasn't going to be what it was when we were dating, and it wasn't going to be what I thought it would be, period. So,
So that was pretty quick. And how long was it? Uh, just remind me on the schedule because you got married in you said 2016. The divorce process really like you were saying in 2021 was when you were in the thick of it. So that was you were married for 4 years,
yes, yes,
legally married. I
yes.
mean, sometimes it's a little different in the actual living situation. I'm finding out, right? So
Right.
yeah. Okay. Um, okay. So how did you and your ex-spouse then decide that you would actually divorce? Because you stuck it out. I don't know what the best way to say that is, but you kept going for 4 years, right? But like, how did you come to that decision? Okay, we're gonna get divorced.
Yeah. Um, the simple answer, which not, nothing about divorce is simple, but the simple answer is I moved out. I left, which I had done 3 times before, but it never had stuck. Um, but I was already pulling away. He had moved out for about 2 weeks at that point. But that was kind of his own decision after one particularly bad argument we had. And I mean, ultimately, I just, after those 2 weeks of space, it gave me enough strength. And I can kind of elaborate on this more a little bit if you'd like, but it gave me enough strength to pull away and detach enough to be able to grab all my stuff, and my family and friends helped me move pretty quickly. It was a bit of a shock to him because of the obviously because of my previous pattern of leaving and coming back, right? And saying, okay, I'm done, and then kind of buckling or coming back. Um, and so yeah, I ultimately it was just I finally moved out, and it stuck, and I moved back to my parents had a basement apartment that they rent. And so thankfully I was able to slide in there and I've been there ever
Yeah.
since, which is great, honestly, with how rent is. So
It's expensive, it's hard, and when you're going through a divorce, it's even more expensive because you're dividing assets, and we'll get to that in a minute. But it sounds like so with that moving in and out like pattern with like were there certain reasons that you felt like coming back to him after you moved out? Like I'm just gonna leave it with that. With what were those reasons? And I know that you've been through like a lot of counseling to like figure that out because it's not always straightforward. So
no,
if you want to share that, yeah.
yeah, I think it's a number of things. And I think all of them are equally as valid, whether they're small or large, at this point in my life. So, I mean, basically, I didn't want to leave my home that I had built. This was the first time that I moved out into what felt like my own home, right? And
Yeah.
so I started to do things that you do to create a space that feels comfortable and you're happy in, right? So there was a lot about my time being married that I feel I did a really great job of building ties to my community and to,
Hmm.
I mean, even my in-laws, oh my goodness, all his little brothers and sisters are so freaking cute. Like, it's just you build this network of people and friends and family, your family grows that you love. And so honestly, it was a lot of outside factors for me that made me still keep going back. But then I think the biggest reason is mentally, like you said, I love therapy and I will probably always go to therapy, but I also needed it during and after my marriage. And so I think it was mostly mentally for me. Like, if I'm being honest, the core of it was I still very much loved him. He was very much my first love, like
Yeah.
first ever love. Um, first ever everything, boyfriend, fiance, marriage, everything, right?
Hmm.
But I think even more than that, the spiritual aspect for me was heavy. I was sealed to him forever, is how I went into it. And so I thought, well, you just make this work. And my parents have made it work for 40 plus years at this point. And so that's the
Yeah.
example, right? That's the example I had to go on, is like, even if things are rough, you just keep going. And I'd like to think of myself as a tough person, even though I'm kind of
Right.
inside. And so I'm
Yeah.
like, no. And I'm super stubborn, as you probably know. You've worked with me enough, I think, in theater to know that I'm stubborn. And I know you're stubborn. So it's like,
You got that right. I'm very stubborn, so I feel like I couldn't call anyone else out on it.
okay, well, I'll call us both out on it then. Um, I was stubborn and probably a little prideful, but mostly I loved him, and there was a certain mental aspect to it where I felt like I couldn't leave. It gave me great anxiety, panic attacks. I'm going to say this just to be vulnerable because I think it's important, because maybe somebody's gone through something similar. But at one point, it got so terrible, and I was trying to leave, but mentally just felt trapped. For whatever reasons, I still don't think I've fully figured it out, but that I thought about taking my own life, like it leaving him gave me that much anxiety that I ended up always going back. And so that 2 week separation there at the end was, I call it my little miracle, because it gave me enough time to mentally and emotionally get to a space where I could healthily and safely leave. And it has been the best decision of my life so far to get divorced.
Yeah, I'm glad that you are at this place where you can say that was the right decision for me because I know like it's scary. It's so scary like to approach that because I think I grew up with the same mentality of you where it's like you stick with it. You've made that decision to be with a person not just for this life, forever, forever, forever. Like and you don't take that lightly. And so because of that commitment to honestly, it's commitment to that promise that we make, almost more than commitment to the person that we've made that promise with. And because it's a three-way promise, the way that we are introduced to it, it's we're promising this to God and this person, and there is that like feeling I do not want to disappoint God.
Mhm.
Even more than I don't want to disappoint my ex-spouse now, you know.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to like come to a place of realizing like God gets more than he's bigger than the promise that we make with him. Like he's gonna understand more about that situation. And um I feel with you there, like coming to realize this was not wrong. It was
Mm-mm.
hard, but it was not wrong. And it's not always wrong. Sometimes it is. I honestly do think some people get divorced and it's wrong. A lot of people get divorced and it's definitely right. And so I've learned to give grace to people. Um, anyway, thanks for sharing that and being vulnerable because I do think a lot of people who go through divorce get to that scary place, whether it's suicidal or just like not knowing their place in the world anymore because it's been attached to this other human that it no longer feels right. I mean, it's so hard. So thank you for that. Were there any other fears that you faced before making that decision or even after making the decision?
Um, I was afraid, going back to kind of the promise between God, and your partner, I was afraid that I think early on I was afraid that I was going to disappoint God, that I wasn't going to be patient enough or loving enough or kind enough to help, see, this is okay. I'll just preface this. Some of the things I say are kind of the phraseology and words that I used to say as an abused woman. And so this is just being very clear. Like I used to think, well, if I'm not strong enough to help him be a better person, I took all that responsibility on myself. And so I was very afraid of disappointing God and not helping my spouse be the best that he could be. When in reality, I was just trying to keep myself, I was trying to keep myself, like my identity intact. I was afraid I was going to lose myself 100%.
Yeah. Hmm.
At one point, I was afraid I just wasn't going to like make it. Like I was going to get so depressed that like I didn't want to live anymore. I guess I had so many fears, but I guess of actually just taking the leap and getting divorced, when it came down to it near the end, I was afraid that I wasn't going to be able to do it. Like that I wouldn't be able to actually divorce him and that I would be stuck
Hmm.
with him forever.
Wow.
It came down to I was so afraid that I wasn't strong enough because I had been broken down so much that I totally doubted any kind of inner strength that I once had. It totally like that whole self-identity thing. Um, who you choose to surround yourself with, whether it's a spouse or just somebody else, but especially when it's a love partner, can make or break you. I fully believe that now. And I was told that before I got married. Like this was going to be one of the most important decisions of your life, right? This will define ultimately your future, and they're not wrong. When you give yourself fully to someone without much regard for making sure you're safe and you're taking care of you, when you just put that complete trust in someone that they're going to take care of you and you're going to take care of them, it's almost like, okay, I'm going to take that responsibility off me. I'm just going to worry about you now and you're going to worry about me. But there's a danger in doing that. It's a lot of trust to be given when, in my case, I didn't really know if I could trust that person fully. And I just went into it thinking I have faith. I have God. Everything's going to be perfect. And I do believe God saved my life through this whole experience, but I made my decision ultimately, and so did my ex, you know.
Yes.
It is a three-way promise, meaning God's not just going to be able to fix everything for you. You both have to be the kind of people that you can trust each other and make it through and be better for each other. But yeah,
I love
ultimately.
that thing. Yeah, I think that's a lot of important stuff to share. My next question then is, what was the divorce process like? So someone who has never been through it, it's like this super daunting thing. In terms of like, how did you decided to divide assets? I know that you had a couple of pets, so like time with those pets or other terms of the divorce that you want to bring in? Like, did you use lawyers, mediation? Was it totally self-guided? And like, how long did that part of the process take for you?
True. That I was nervous about that, but ultimately the ball was in my court, right? I left. I was initiating the divorce, so I knew that was something that I needed to decide. I had learned that you can't just, and unfortunately, because I'm a cheap, I'm a cheap bum, but also I do like to do it myself, and so I was like, I would rather just honestly figure out how to do it and file the divorcings, you know, because I didn't have a lot of money personally. He was a little bit more well off than I was. But I was initiating the divorce. So, and I knew how he
Mm,
was with his finances, and that was very important for him. So I knew he wouldn't be very willing to go half and half on a divorce, even though ultimately I was, from what I'd been told by just friends who had been divorced and things, that it's typically half and half. The judge is usually like, yeah, just split
yeah.
it, you know, you're splitting ways. So I decided to use this mediation firm that was like, it's literally still right across the street from where I live, like the major street. I just was driving by it almost every day for work when I had moved out. And so within a couple of weeks of moving back to my parents, I I was driving by it and I was like, okay, I'm gonna give them a call. They were decent. It was a mediation firm. What I'd learned is you can't just kind of get divorced yourself. You have to at least have a mediator. You don't have to get lawyers and fight it out in court, but you need at least a mediator to help you file, is at least what I was told. Is that
I
correct? Did you like,
it's not because I never used a mediator or a lawyer. I'm so sorry that you were misled.
oh my goodness.
That's misinformation. But maybe they
Oh,
might
no,
have actually been helpful, but I'm upset that someone would say that you have to have that.
I thought that in Utah, in order
Wow.
to get divorced, you didn't have to do like court and lawyers, which it didn't obviously want to do, but you had to at least
Yeah.
have me. Well, but I do think it was good for us.
Mhm.
Ultimately, I tend to be a pretty peaceful person, but with anything that's high pressure and emotional and splitting of your life apart, it's incredibly stressful. So it helped mediate probably his anger and my fears. And so
Absolutely. Hmm.
um, it wasn't too expensive, although I did front all of the money up front
Wow.
because again, my partner, my ex-partner was not willing to, you know, he was like, you're the one getting divorced, so take care of it. I was like, okay.
Wow. So you had to put your money where your heart was, really. That's a
Exactly.
hard thing to do.
Yeah.
Mm.
But I think like with most anything, if it's worth it to you and it's something you need, you're gonna make it happen, right? Um, I think I may or may not have borrowed money from a family member up until the divorce was final. So at first I was the kind of person that was like, well, he worked really hard and he bought the condo and he bought the couch and he bought the TV and he bought all these things. I didn't spend my money on that. So it's not really mine, you know. That's kind of how I felt about divorce in general.
Okay.
But then after some good strong talking to from my family, they were like, Linda, you have been through so much with this marriage. You have cleaned that house more than he ever has. You have, you know, you've done all these things to invest in this life with him, that don't discount yourself. Like if that's really what you feel like, you're just going to let him leave whatever he has, you know, and not touch a penny of it or anything, then fine. But ultimately, I was contributing to bills throughout those years. And although I didn't keep a tally, because you don't really think like, well, I'm going to need to know this information when I get divorced while you're married, you know, you just don't really know. And so ultimately the deciding factor for me was, well, I'm going to now be in therapy for the rest of my life, probably because of this experience alone. um he might as well help pay me pay for that therapy. That's what I thought. I was like, okay, I don't have a lot right now, but I know I need this for my health, and let's just split it down the middle. And he was pretty surprised when I changed my mind. This was before we really got into mediation. I told him, I said, I have thought about it more, and I would like half the equity in the condo. I would like half, we obviously had debts to, actually our finances have been separate for about 3 years because of personal decisions. But ultimately we split all of our debt that we both had down the middle, and we split all of our assets down the middle. And I'm so happy I did not just buckle and take the easy,
Mhm.
um, because ultimately it did help me get my life back started again. I had to start over completely. I had like hardly no kitchen things. Like I left the physical things in the condo. I only took what I pretty much had brought in with me with the marriage. Everything
Wow.
I just
Mhm.
left because I knew he'd throw a fit, and I didn't want that. I was like, I don't care about all these things that were in our house. I just want what I took, and I want my dogs, but I'll get
You
into that.
want out, right? Like, and
Yeah,
yeah.
I just want out. And so yeah, we just went halvesies. The mediation went pretty well, surprisingly well. I was expecting more of a fight from him, to be honest. Um, Other than
That's
bringing,
where a mediator, I've actually sat there with a friend during part of a mediation. A mediator does help talk someone down who would be fighting hard. And so it is useful in that case when there's a fighter or two fighters. They
yeah,
they are actually very useful. So absolutely.
it was good. It was definitely, it was over. It was during COVID still, kind of. So
Mhm.
it was Zoom basically, is
Yeah.
between three of us, and that honestly helped too, because being in the same room with him at that time would have been even more emotionally hard. It was hard enough just seeing him on camera at that point. Um, but yeah, we mediated. I paid for most of it, and then ultimately with the adjudication, he did fork up his half eventually.
Wow.
That was okay. Ultimately, I don't
Well,
think.
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I love that you had people that you talked to who gave you honest feedback about how to stand up for yourself, because when it's like easy to help fix someone else's problems when you're not in this situation, but in that situation where honestly you're going through so much emotional, maybe physical, mental, all of this turmoil, and decision making is not going to be anyone's strongest suit in that state of mind. And so like it's so important. I love that that you had a good network of people who would talk with you about that. That's so important to call out. Like, if someone's not willing to talk to people during a divorce, they're going to be in a bad situation.
Yeah.
And let's see. So, how long did the it take from like mediation when you started mediation till you actually got divorced? Because that amount of time varies between people all the time.
Um, so started mediation. Okay, so I left in April of 2021. A couple weeks after I got the ball rolling. I would say I'd say we started mediation in late May, early June. And then through July, we were just kind of, I mean, mediation, we maybe only met like twice, I think.
Okay.
Honestly, it didn't take us too long. He sent us the stuff, like the
Yeah.
dividing assets worksheets and all these, simple things to just gather data and information. And then we met maybe twice. Yeah, it was twice. And then I'd say the divorce was final August 5th of
Okay.
2021. So April to August, and then I was free. And that was, I thought it was going to be longer. There's this like 30-day waiting period that the courts make you do, and they
Yeah.
tried to waive it. Yeah. We motioned to waive it, but ultimately I wasn't, they basically told me they're going to deny it. Like there's not really like a super great reason for you to, not hold off for 30 days. And I was like, okay, that's fine.
Hmm.
So it was pretty quick.
Yeah. And that 30 days for you, like that didn't really change your lifestyle, did it? Like,
Mm. So here's the interesting thing about as far as me personally detaching from my marriage, it'd been happening slowly for a couple years. Clearly, I tried to leave before, right? And so
okay.
I felt it, no, it didn't. I felt divorced from him already. I honestly did. I
Yeah.
felt like
It's
I'm done. Like I don't have to be with you anymore. I don't have to talk to you anymore. Nothing. The only thing that was, I mean, other than just the like monetary assets, our sweetie puppies, which I did
mhm.
text you a picture, but
I
just for
just saw that. They look so cute.
yeah,
Yes.
our puppies.
I'll put that on the video if that's okay. Can I
Yeah,
show
no,
that
it's
picture?
great.
Awesome.
Yeah, do
Mhm.
it, please.
Look at the
Uh,
picture, people. It's
yeah,
right
look at the
there.
pictures. They're adorable. The black and white one's Nora, and she's a poodle. And then the black one's Lilo, and she's a Labradoodle. Nora, I got within the first year of our marriage, and she has been the love of my life, I say right now. She's just a beautiful, amazing animal, and I love her. So, um, she's with me still, and I was able to take her. I still, how do I put this? I still had a heart when I first was getting divorced. Now I'm much harsher with people, and I
Mhm.
take what I want versus, I don't know. I think I was a little too kind, but I love Lilo so much. But we did get her, well, he got her when we had separated at one point, and his
Mhm.
parents gave him a puppy from one of the litters they had. And so it was technically his dog, I would say, but I bonded with her so closely. Like, I don't know. She was one of my babies. And that we didn't have any children in our marriage, if that's something that people were wondering. So
Mhm.
these were my babies, right? They were sisters in my mind, and I didn't want to separate them. He, in an emotional conversation we had before I vacated our condo, had said, "You can just take both of them. I don't want them separated either." And I said, "Okay, great."
Yeah.
However, I felt at the time, and this is probably the only thing that I actually regret. Actually, yes, it's the only thing I regret. Um, I at the time was moving into my parents' basement, and my mom knew Lilo and Nora. She said, "Well, Lilo's kind of high energy and she tends to destroy things." And I said, "Yes, she is
Mhm.
high energy. That's that lab in her that likes to chew things as well." And I said, "But mom, she's old enough. I know how to take care of her, you know." Um, but ultimately I decided not to bring her here. For that was probably the biggest one, is I needed a place to stay first and foremost.
Yeah.
And also, my sister was living here at the time with her cat, and I didn't know how two dogs and a cat would work. And there was just a lot of those like things, but mostly I was pretty overwhelmed, and I knew I could handle Nora, but I wasn't confident in myself yet and in my healing process to feel like I could take Lilo with me. Ultimately, that was probably the biggest regret, is I ended up leaving Lilo with him. And at the time I was like, you know what, I still really want to see her though. And I know you love Nora, so like maybe we can either just drop them off here and there, like split time, you know, kind of thing with our dogs. But with everything how it ended up, he was pretty upset with me naturally and really angry. And so that didn't end up happening. And it was ultimately best for us to just not communicate at all. And so that didn't happen. So I ended up with Nora, he ended up with Lilo. And I miss her so terribly, but you can't change the past. And I've had to just try to move on. But yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, I remember also one of those things that you talked about with me when you were in the thick of it. We were both in the thick of it at the same time, actually.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, was that he was going to require you to no longer have his last name, right? And so you went back to your original maiden name, right?
Hmm.
Hmm.
That was
Yeah,
interesting. That was interesting.
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't think much of it. It honestly, I when I changed my name when I got married, it was kind of a pain in the butt, to be honest. And it's even harder
Yeah.
after you get divorced. And so I was like, I don't really care. I'm Linda. Like I'll just I don't really feel like going through all that trouble of changing my name right now. Maybe I will later, but he was very adamant and I knew I wasn't going to get his cooperation in the mediation and divorce if I didn't change my name. So he was like, I want it done by this date. It was part of like the divorce like agreement that it had to be done by a certain time. So as stressful as that was, yeah, he was very adamant that he did not want me associated with his last name anymore.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, that is stressful. That's a big ask, honestly, I think. But ultimately, you've expressed that you are very grateful that you got divorced, that this was the right decision for you and that it was good for you.
Mhm.
Um, how have you kind of like seen those previous fears that you had put to rest? 'Cause that's a hard thing to get to that stage, but it does happen.
Yeah. Well, as hard as it was for me to see it clearly while I was in the marriage with him, it became very clear after that I was incredibly, I mean, I knew I was unhappy, but I was incredibly unhappy because when I was able to get out of that and be completely free, I started to regain myself again. I started to focus on loving myself again. And it was so important. And so a lot of those fears about disappointing God or not being able to do it, well, clearly I had just done it, right? So, like, I can do anything. That self confidence came back to me. Um, I didn't feel like I had disappointed God with getting divorced. I actually felt that I actually like hindsight, it's 2020. I actually had looked back and been like, wow, he was definitely putting people, this is God that I believe was putting people in my path to help me, number one, survive, number two, learn about what we would call in TikToks nowadays red flags are. Learn what these things are, learn what abuse is, learn what just learn, what it would feel like to because I never cheated, but I often mentally would look at other couples and I would look at how the man was treating his wife. And I would go, that is super different than what my relationship with my spouse is. Mind you, you don't see what's happening on at home, right? But I had close friends that I was over at their house quite often. And I would see how these respectful, nice men would treat their wives. And I wanted that so badly. And I was like, what would it be like? I wonder. What would my life be like with someone who's like, sweet and kind and gentle? Um, and so I just felt like those examples and those people that God put in my life at that time really helped me ultimately get divorced. And so I felt really grateful to God and I felt like I was finally free and that I could love myself the way that God loves me, which I hadn't done in a long time. And I honestly feel like it brought me a deeper understanding. I felt like I had joined a group of, I didn't feel so alone. You know how some, like when you get divorced, yes, there's a lonely aspect to it, obviously, because you've been with
Yeah.
someone 24/7 for years, right? Or however long. But I honestly didn't feel very lonely because my family and friends wrapped around me and I was able to um, just realize how good of a decision it was. And so all those fears about being lonely and stuff just dispelled because I have people in my life. And I think if you've ever been in an abusive relationship, the biggest tactic is they'll try to make you feel alone. They'll try to make you feel like they're all that you have. And so when you wake up and kind of realize, oh, you're not all I have, actually. I have myself first and foremost. For me, as a religious person, I have God, but then I also have all these other people that I kind of maybe forgot were there for a little bit, or at least didn't realize how there they are for me, because I was pulling away and all that. So, um,
Yeah, I think that's so valuable. We have to be able to have those relationships with other people because we can't isolate ourselves from the world just because we've entered into this marriage, right? Um, Marriage should be an expansion of our network, not an isolation thing. Like we are all in like you join families. It's not just you two joining each other and you're now in your own bubble. Like I remember when I mean you and I had a while when we hadn't connected for a while, but I remember when you called me one morning and I was on my way to work and you were talking a little bit about what you were going through. And I didn't totally understand. I didn't know exactly where you were coming from, but looking back on that, I'm really grateful that you felt like you could reach out, even just to express that you were going through a hard thing. And I don't think I responded in a way that was helpful. I didn't know how to respond, but I'm grateful that like we've stayed in each other's circles, even though I live in DC, you're in Utah, but like we're still in those circles and no matter the distance, that matters so much. So
I totally forgot about that, but I remember now. Yeah. Yes. You were
I
one
know
of the,
exactly where I was, and I was like, I'm a little bit late to work anyway, but I'd rather talk to Linda. Like,
oh my gosh.
yeah,
See, I didn't know
yeah.
that. Maybe I didn't
But
realize.
I didn't know how to respond very compassionately because I wasn't in the same space. I wasn't even married yet, actually. I was engaged, but not
Yes,
married
you
yet.
were. Yes, you were.
Yeah.
Gregory, you were the one that got away for me. I say that jokingly. We have
I
had
I hear it with all the love. Yeah.
we have had a great friendship, and I'm so happy we've had it as well. And I do remember now just feeling so desperately lonely. But you were one of those, I think I told you this, you were one of those people that I greatly looked up to as a kind man, which at that point I knew a lot of kind women, but I wasn't married to a woman. I was married to a man, and he wasn't as nice as other men that I knew in my life. And so that's why I reached out to you. I remember just feeling like I want to reach out to somebody who's kind. I was yearning for connection with men that wasn't even if it was just friendships, just kind men, because for me that was important to, I don't know, I guess not lose all hope that there's like nice people out there.
I think you're right. Because when you're in an experience where like that's not what you're living, it's like, wait, is this just how everybody's living? Like you start to wonder, like, I think that's fine. Again, I don't think that I responded with the best. I think what was going through my mind, honestly, and I don't know how much we want to keep this this video, but like what was going through my mind is Linda's married. I need to respect that boundary, and I'm about to get married. I need to definitely focus on the person that I'm about to marry, so I can't let there be um an intermingling because we had like acted together and because we have actually kissed. Like even though it's acting, it's stage because there's like we still have a very close emotional connection from our friendship, I think, and I didn't want to jeopardize either of our marriages because of that. Um, but I think that fear, see again, I think that was more fear speaking than like I think it got in the way of me being able to express probably the best things that a friend should be able to express to another friend, no matter their marriage status. So I kind of have like these little regrets in my heart, but also like gratitude that you reached out to me in that time.
Thank you. I mean, I I have no complaints about how you reacted. I 100% understand. I mean, there's a line, this is something I've kind of, just a little tangent and maybe,
Oh.
yeah. Um, there's a difference between, I've learned from like specific podcasts that my therapist even gave me. And he was like, there's a difference between respecting someone and flirting with them in that way, like flirting with someone that you respect and find admirable things about, versus flirting to become romantic and sexual with them. And so that's something that I've had to like
Hmm.
differentiate between, because growing up, I was taught that like if you compliment somebody of the opposite sex, you're flirting with them. Okay, yeah, maybe I'm flirting if I give someone else a compliment, but it doesn't have to be like I want to start a romantic relationship with you. And that was something that I think I was trying to clear the air before you got married. I think I was. I think
Wow.
I was trying to like um close any kind of residual feelings of like regret that I had had for
Mm.
not dating around more, because we actually had been in the same stake and in the same ward.
We were so like we could have easily dated.
We could have
Yeah.
easily dated.
Yeah.
I it probably wouldn't have worked out. I like us much better as friends, but I'm just like, it
Yeah.
just was something that, if you have a bunch of doubts, they can kind of eat away at you. And as like mature adults, I feel like it's okay to acknowledge like that could have been something, but let's just talk it out and clear the air. You know what I mean? And I feel like we've done that since then. And it's
Yeah.
very clear, like it just wouldn't have been a thing, And I've met your ex, and she's beautiful and
She's wonderful. Yeah.
amazing. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sure you guys are still really great friends, is
We
what I've
are.
heard from you. So it's that's beautiful. And so like not all divorce has to be like mine was, where it's just a bitter, ugly experience, but
Mm.
or the marriage, I guess. The divorce.
Yeah. Um, I'm gonna ask this question. I think you kind of answered this, but if there's anything more you want to elaborate on, how has your perception of divorce changed from the start of your marriage and like to how you view it now?
I I think most people don't regret getting divorced. That's a blanket statement. I don't have statistics, but I have yet to meet someone who didn't ultimately do it for a very genuine, important reason, whatever side it was on. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Ultimately, we decide to get married because we think it's going to make us happy, and those kinds of things. I think people genuinely go into divorce thinking the same thing, but it's incredibly painful and difficult. So
Yeah.
I think it's a positive thing. Um, for myself, my personal experience, for a lot of people. There are some, I think, like you said earlier, there are some instances where it can be kind of more sad than anything else if someone's just made a mistake and their partner just can't live with it. But ultimately, it's sad. There's some instances where divorce is, I mean, I think it's always painful and sad, but for the most part, at least for me, I am genuinely much happier. So,
I'm curious and so I've been able to talk with my ex-wife and we've kind of come to this. It makes my heart feel really glad that she's been able to say that um this does feel like it was probably the right thing. Have you been able to hear that from your ex-husband at all? I don't know how much contact you have, but like, has that ever been expressed?
no, actually, unfortunately, he we still have some crossover in our professional world. I don't see him a lot, but in our world with those kinds of things. I From what I've heard through the grapevine, because I don't talk to him. So no, so I guess to answer your question, no, I haven't heard that. But um yeah, I guess I'm gonna leave it at that. Honestly,
That's
no,
fair.
we don't really communicate. I haven't heard that.
Yeah.
So
I think a lot of people on the receiving end, see, I don't know of anyone on the instigating end really who has said they regret it, but on the receiving end, I do wonder, like,
no, that's fair,
how
yeah.
many people come to that same like acknowledgement that maybe this was right for both partners. I think it might just take a lot of time, but people can get there. Um,
That's
because
fair.
because yeah, life goes on and it
Yeah.
can be beautiful. It should be beautiful. You should
Yeah.
make it more beautiful, right?
Yeah.
Um, I'm gonna ask probably just one more question. You've touched on most of these other things. So, what advice would you give somebody? Actually, this is gonna be three different questions. First off, what would you give advice would you give someone who is recently divorced?
Um just really, really be patient with yourself. And if you have contact with the other person, with them as well. Um, this is super commonly known thing: death, marriage, and divorce. Super stressful life events, right? Um, which to me, divorce and marriage being on par with death was like surprising. But at this point in my life, I believe it. Having been through, loss, as most of us probably have as we get older, loss of loved ones and divorce, it's very similar. So be incredibly patient with yourself first and foremost, and just don't make any rash decisions. I think it's super important to slowly acclimate back into your own solo life and realizing that you're really not alone at all. There's always going to be someone who cares about you. If you self-isolate, that's going to be very detrimental. So just make sure you're surrounding yourself with, go have fun. I mean, that's a big thing. Don't make any big rash life decisions. Just let yourself be divorced for a while. Let yourself be single, settle into that role and be like, okay, I feel good about me. I want to work on myself, just really love yourself
Mm.
and give yourself that action behind that love, do those things that are healthy for yourself. But have fun, if you need to go let out you're crazy a little bit, but go dancing or whatever, have fun. Like that's been so important for me too. Like find the fun things and the happy things in life to start those habits.
Mm. Sounds like a good way to like find your inherent self-worth. Like your worth does not depend on your relationship status at all.
Mhm.
And so I think I love that. Okay, second part, what advice would you give to someone who is getting divorced? So not just recently divorced, but getting a divorce or going through that divorce right now.
um be kind,
Mm.
even if to yourself and to the person that your ex-partner or soon to be ex-partner. Be kind, because even if they've wronged you so much and you feel totally justified in being a jerk, ultimately you probably will regret that later. Stand up for yourself. Make sure you are not being taken advantage of, because as much as we want to be our best selves, and even if two people are very much like beautiful, wonderful people, divorce is incredibly stressful. And so our worst parts can come out. So just be thoughtful. Try not to let your emotions run that. Almost be pragmatic, because it's a lot easier to um I don't know, just be kind. It looks differently in every situation. Um Whether that means just not communicating if it's a bad situation, or whether it means just maybe not saying those things that maybe you're feeling really emotional about. Maybe go to therapy and vent all that out. So then when you're mediating or doing these things to get divorced, you can just say and bring your best self to that, because ultimately you don't want to leave that with any regrets for yourself. If nothing else, just do it so that you can be proud of how you behaved towards another human being on this planet. So
That's beautiful. Okay, third part. What advice would you give someone who is considering divorce, but they're not totally sure if they're going to go through with it or if they should go through with it?
trust your instincts. If you've been thinking about it, there's usually a reason why. It's not just out of the blue. I mean, there's so many different reasons that people get divorced. So think about it
Our
carefully.
reasons are completely different, right?
So many different
Yeah,
reasons. So
yeah.
give it the attention it deserves. If it's just a phase, I mean, honestly, therapy, therapy, if it's
Mm,
just a phase and you don't really want to burden your spouse with talking about all of, and maybe it'll hurt your spouse, maybe it'll hurt your relationship. If it's just a phase you're going through, or something that maybe is just a bump in the road, go to therapy. Go to therapy with your spouse. Honestly, there's this like kind of stigma where if you go to couples therapy, you're pretty much going to get divorced. Like if you need therapy with your
mm,
partner, you're going to get divorced. It's a stigma. It's I don't think it's totally true.
yeah.
I don't, but
Huh.
it'll help you see really clearly from an outsider's perspective, a professional who is a third party, not invested emotionally in either side. It'll help you mediate and talk it out. So maybe you can leave that experience going, okay, I feel stronger with this person. And it was a phase. Let's just work through this. Or you've learned, okay, this is something that we have differences, and they're like our core personality, and it's not really going to change. Can I live with that, or can I not? So I think therapy, I think giving it some time to think about it. If it's a bad situation and they're not being kind to you, this is my opinion. Just get out. Just leave. Just and that's me. I mean, if they are not kind to you and they are not treating you well, just leave. It's not worth your time or the pain that it can cause you. But that's me.
Okay, that was a Linda opinion, and I think she has good perspective after going through her divorce. So thank you for sharing that. I think people are gonna actually, anyone who needs to hear some of this, of like what someone else has gone through in a divorce, you've been very kind about how you've approached this. I haven't heard you badmouth really your ex-husband at all. So way to go. I think that's very impressive because people who go through a divorce and feel like they've been abused have a hard time doing that, from my experience, and justifiably so. I'm not bad mouthing people who badmouth others.
You're
I
right.
honestly I just want to throw that out there. That takes a lot of intentional um, ways of approaching this. So I think that's really admirable, Linda.
Thank you.
Um, just a little recap of a few things that we talked about. So you were very blessed to find your grace period, this 2 weeks of separation that gave you strength to really detach and see things a little clearer. It was a scary thing to do because like you were facing this, it's like a sunk cost fallacy. You've put so much into this relationship. Like how do you pull away from all the good things that do exist because of this? It's scary, no matter how you approached it. Like you called yourself a cheap bum for deciding to do things the way you did. You're not a cheap bum. It's one of the ways that it exists, and it fit what you needed to, and it led to you finding mediation, and like, which was probably, it sounds like, the right way to go through things for you. And I'm really glad that you were able to find that. And overall, like, it's so cool to see like that you are in a place where you have your self-confidence, and like you're someone, Linda, I'm just gonna say this to you, and hopefully people can understand this about themselves if where it applies. But like, you are inherently worth it, and because you have a lot of beauty inside and out, and you've always been able to like make a decision, and you've taken that initiative, and I think that's so important. You're really talented. You have so much compassion for people, and like you just have so much to be confident about. So thank you for sharing this experience. People, if they ever listen, and I don't know if people do listen to these, but just kidding. I can see the views, but like I don't know what it'll look like in the future, honestly.
Drama queen.
Yeah. But like, I think this is something that people going through this should listen to because it can help a lot. So thank you. Thank you. Do you have any last words before we stop this?
Um, I'm gonna quote Harry Potter because I love it so much. Help will always be given at Hogwarts to those who need it. So, or ask for it. So just you're not alone and you never will be. This world's full of a lot of really good people, but just realize that you deserve to be around those good people and they'll find you and you'll find them and it'll be good.